All right, forgive us. We're going to do some breaking news instead right now. We've got some news from the Justice Department and the Federal Reserve. Let's bring in MS Now Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian. Ken, what's happening?
Katie, a federal judge has just delivered a striking repudiation to Donald Trump's Department of Justice by quashing the subpoenas that the DOJ and U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro served on the Fed, the Federal Reserve, and Jerome Powell in connection with its criminal investigation purportedly into that renovation of the Fed building. Judge Boasberg, the president judge here in Washington, D.C., issued a stark opinion criticizing this investigation as unfounded and without evidence. I just want to read a key line at the beginning of the opinion. He said, "There is abundant evidence that the subpoena's dominant, if not sole purpose, is to harass and pressure Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, either to yield to the president or to resign to make way for a Fed chair who will." He said, on the other side of the scale, the government has offered no evidence whatsoever that Powell committed any crime other than displeasing the president. So, look, a lot of people looked at this investigation and said that this was a pretext, that this is a way for Donald Trump to try to pressure the Fed. But here is a federal judge who has now ruled in his court of law and released this ruling to the land that is exactly what he believes happened. Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., is scheduled to have a news conference. Perhaps as we speak, she may be talking potentially to respond to this. And it seems likely to me that they will try to appeal this ruling. But for right now, this is a resounding ruling by a federal judge to essentially stop this investigation in its tracks and to brand it as essentially unfounded and a way for the Trump administration to harass the Federal Reserve, Katie.
Yeah, and I'm just going through it right now. It's a pretty lengthy ruling. He also gets into, on page 22, the president's tendency to prosecute his political enemies. For example, in September 2025, the president voiced his frustration with his hand-picked prosecutors' lack of results, posting on Truth Social, "Nothing is being done." What about Comey, Adams, Shifty Schiff, Letitia? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. It's interesting that he's citing this stuff, too, saying that, I guess, Ken, that the president is not dictated, or the DOJ is not dictated by law, not pursuing crimes, but instead pursuing the president's political agenda.
Yeah, and remember, Judge Boasberg has a history with this administration. He's also been involved in trying to investigate whether they violated court orders related to those deportation flights to Central America. And by the way, he is not a far-left judge by any means. He's a very establishment figure, well-regarded in Washington. And, you know, we've been wondering when all this stuff was going to start to catch up to the Trump administration, because all these judges are human beings. They see what Donald Trump is saying as he tries to pressure his Justice Department to investigate his political enemies. And it appears today is one of the days where this is caught up, because this opinion, as you said, is replete with Donald Trump's own words, where he is seeking to bend the Justice Department to his will and to put pressure on them to do things that seem like they are just out of naked political motive and have nothing to do with the rule of law. And he's essentially throwing that back in their face now and saying again that this criminal investigation of the Federal Reserve was just a pretext for Donald Trump to pressure Jerome Powell and the Fed to lower interest rates or to do his bidding. And that's not how this works in the United States of America, at least for now, with this court ruling, Katie.
So he also says a little bit later on, the Office of the Inspector General audited the renovation at the Fed in 2022, did not raise any concerns about potential criminality following its audit, and the Inspector General is presently conducting another review. Such an investigation is not the dominant purpose of the USAO's subpoenas. Rather, the president's aggressive demands that the Federal Reserve implement his desired monetary policy, coupled with his direction to prosecutors to target his enemies, leave no doubt about what is really going on here. Even where the court's review of executive action is deferential, the court is not required to exhibit a naivete from which ordinary citizens are free. So this is Boasberg saying, I can read the room and I know what's going on here, and it's not what the administration is trying to claim. Ken, stick by. Joining us now, Axios chief economic correspondent Neil Irwin and professor of economics at the University of Michigan, Justin Wolfers. I know we were going to talk more broadly about the economy, but this is something obviously that's going to affect it. and the president's desire to do away with the Federal Reserve chairman. Neil, I'll start with you. Your reaction.
Yeah, look, this has all along been a question of can the president use the Justice Department to try and penalize a Federal Reserve chairman he disagrees with on policy? A federal judge is saying, no, you cannot do it that way. The question is this the off-ramp that we've kind of been looking for, that the president and the Justice Department have been needing? We have Kevin Warsh has been nominated to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. Powell's term is up in less than 2 months, May 23rd. It's not that long away. Do they use this as a moment to say, OK, we're just going to move on and let Powell serve out his term and try and get Kevin Warsh confirmed? Or do they dig in and try and come to their heads and really fight this to the death? That's the big question I have now, as they've had this, sounds like a resounding defeat at the initial judicial level.
Here's a warning from Thom Tillis, senator from North Carolina, who had threatened to block Kevin Warsh because of this lawsuit. He says the ruling to block subpoenas against Powell confirms just how weak and frivolous the investigation, and he's now warned the DOJ against appealing the ruling, saying it will only delay the confirmation of Kevin Warsh as the next Fed chair. So he's saying, Justin, if you guys delay this, I'm going to dig in my heels and I'm not going to confirm your next guy.
Mate, I'm just going to say, what fantastic news. So I jumped on. I thought we were going to talk about everything else about the economy, and then you just give me this magnificent news. And I mean magnificent not as a partisan, but as someone who cares deeply about economics, our economic institutions and how they serve the United States. The president had tried to criminalise disagreeing with him. That's what these subpoenas were. They were like, I don't like what you're doing. I am going to threaten you with jail. To be clear, what Powell did is simply follow what Congress asked him to do. Following the law as a noble public servant, you might disagree with the bloke, you might agree with the bloke, but following what Congress tells you to do, following the law, is not the sort of thing that should ever land you in jail. The president tried to put the US in the same group of countries that have tried to criminalise doing the right thing as chairman of the Fed. That's a group that includes Russia, it includes Zimbabwe, it includes Argentina, it includes Turkey, and it includes no successful economy. So it's great to see American institutions hold and a little bit of respect for real public servants doing real work.